Hi there, it's Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder here with this week's episode of Market Monday. So this week I'm going to go back to a classic of mine, which is looking at the Commander cards that are being released from the new set and seeing if there is any opportunity for these cards to make a buck on. So this can happen in twofold. A is the obvious one. When a card comes out, people might not identify how it will play out in Commander, or might just be underappreciated, and then eventually when the demand outstrips the supply, then you'll have the opportunity for this card to go up. And this could take months, of course. You can think of cards like Guardian Project or Smothering Tide from most recent sets that have had just substantial growth within the past couple of years. Those cards are not even that old, and they were known cards. People knew how good they were going to be in Commander, and yet they still flattened out or bottomed out and then had the opportunity to buy into them at a pretty cheap price. And yeah, we don't have like drafts going on or pre-releases going on to the amount that we used to when paper tournaments were a thing, but there still is enough paper product being opened up that I think that you can still make out like a bandit if you do identify these cards and just wait a year or two for these cards to appreciate in value. The second where you can make money is looking at a card, and the cards are a commander that is from this new set, and then finding synergistic cards that everyone's going to want to buy to add to their deck. And this is something that slowly trickles for the few months. You'll see some big buyouts right off the bat, so we might have missed the boat on some of these cards. But other cards that aren't like the top 1 or 5 of those particular cards still have the opportunity to go up in value as the demand starts outstripping the supply for those cards as well. So I like to identify more of the obscure cards, more of the low supply cards in this category. So we're going to start out with our first thing, and I think I'm going to have a follow-up video tomorrow on the Rogue Market that's going to talk about my top 10 cards. And I haven't really looked over many of these cards right now, so you're going to be able to see an inside view of how my mind works when analyzing a set. So let's look at the first of these categories. EDH Rec. This is a godsend when it comes to Commander. And Commander is now the bread and butter for speculating. These are standard, modern, Pioneer, historic. These need to have actual paper tournaments, actual Grand Prix, actual events before we're going to start seeing the spikes of yesteryear with these particular cards. And I do think that will happen in the future. I think there will be a time in Magic the Gathering when competitive cards will have their heydays again. It's probably not in the foreseeable future. It also is kind of weird with the amount of cards that are being printed, with the supply just being so high that even the more standard playable cards have a harder time being outstretched even within their standard livelihood, or what we used to do with rotation. Rotation used to be a good time to pick up cards from the sets that are still going to stay in the rotation as old sets go out, new sets go in. So Zendikar would be a good set to start looking at in about July, August. But without paper tournaments being played, I don't think that that's the way to go right now. Commander is king when it comes to buying and selling singles. So anyway, so we're going to look at not the Commanders right now. Let's look at the top cards. Now, which EDH Rec would go back to its old way? Maybe someone can, if there's a way to sort these by how many cards, how many decks they see play in, not the percentage of decks. Because the percentage of decks, of course, is misleading when you have like a 5-color card. It can only go in very specific color combinations. So what we're really looking at is these numbers. And of course, we're going to look at the price versus the demand of what this card is, and that can give us a good representation of where I think this card will be in the future. Well, let's start off with the first monocolor cards here with Archmage Emeritus. This one's actually very, very interesting because 18% of 548 decks. If you look at some of the newer commanders, it's all spells matter, and it has a cool Magecraft ability. It's strictly better than what the Vildalkin Archmage, or is that the one that does artifacts? I remember that there's one that was very similar to this one. Whenever you're casting a sorcery spell, draw a card. But Magecraft also allows you to, whenever you copy an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. It's very fun with a card called Icecon Scepter. Icecon Scepter should definitely be on people's short lists for cards that look interesting with this Magecraft, because copying, I think anything that copies a spell gets very, very interesting with this set. And there will be some cards that might not have the demand right now for those particular cards. They're not like the shoe-in cards for these key mechanics of the set, but they will be when everyone starts to see how well they work, and we need to find those particular cards to get in on before the spikes occur. So Archmage Emeritus is very interesting for this one. Rares typically do bottom out to below $1, even if they are commander playable, and then they start to recover. Again, we do have some references, like even Guardian Project back in the day from Ravnica Allegiance had its time where it was very, very low, and you can see it's just gone up, up, up. It's now a $10 card. So I wouldn't fault anyone for buying it at this price for the Archmage Emeritus. I'll have to check to see if this is actually a card that is in the commander decks or any sort of pre-constructed decks at that point, and that, of course, will be a tick against it if it is, but if it isn't, then I think that a rare that is heavily played in Commander does have the potential of going up. So again, this advice is going to be when you find the bottom of a set. I have said many, many times the worst thing that you can do is pre-order cards because you're getting in on a high price for pre-orders. The only time you can make out on pre-orders is typically when a card is underrated or undervalued or under-evaluated, and then it does hit the usually competitive scenes, like think of cards like Arc like Phoenix, and then you can actually make money on the pre-orders. But that is rare. That's one in 1,000 opportunities where pre-orders actually go up after the fact. It used to be a thing, but now, with the amount of supply that's coming out with collector's editions, with all the other product, the supply always outstretches the demand at first. No matter how much demand there is for a card, it's still going to go down just based on the supply. But supply does tend to actually start to get eaten up quicker than usual, and people move on from products a lot faster than they used to. It used to be that the attention span for any given set would be a lot higher for packs being open, and now it's like, oh, what's the new shiny thing? Modern Horizons 2 coming out? Oh yeah, what was that Strixhaven set? Yeah, no one cares about anymore. And so the supply train ends for that particular set, and then those cards can start to go up. So I do like this Archmage Emeritus. I don't know what I'd value it at. Of course, the card kingdom in the TC player spread is very, very different here. I wonder if this is actually showing foil. Yeah, it is. Okay. So sometimes there is this problem with the, non-foil is up to $6. Regular foil is up to, and there is a little bit of a lack of supply. So Card Kingdom might be just having these high prices for this card because they haven't been able to restock with the draft and set boosters not having, or even collector's edition not hitting their mass supply yet. These are going to be a little bit inflated. So you can look at the Strixhaven price versus the TC player. The same thing you can do is you can go over to TC player and then see where these are selling. They've already gone up to about $2. I do think that this will flatten back out, but this is a great card. This is a good card that you should start looking for deals on. So you don't want to be paying premium for this card. You want to find the lowest one here. And this is another thing you got to realize with speculating or buying into cards is you never want to cause your own prices to go higher. So what I mean by that is you don't just like click, buy all these up to $3. Just like right now, just buy them all out right now. So what you're going to do is you're going to create that demand, or you're going to stretch that supply, that now when other people go to list their cards, they're actually going to list them at a higher price. So you want to just be slow and steady with this methodical way of buying these cards, as when you have the low one, then you have like a price point. A lot of times I'll look for like a cheap one here. I can get, save on shipping by buying 3 of them. Okay, my total cost of this one would be like in the $2.20. Okay, I'll buy this one. But you don't go crazy on one day. If you're planning on selling in 6-7 months, don't go on one day, buy out all the inventory and cause the price to be jacked up by yourself. So then, you're kind of competing against your own prices at that point, your ability to buy into two prices. So this is where I would say the Archmage Emeritus stands here. It's going to be played in a lot of these Spells Matter type decks. It's pretty good for Commander. It does have some historical cards that are very similar to this that have been able to appreciate in value over time. These do tend to get printed a lot. I don't know if they're going to be reprinting things like Magecraft. It's a lot easier to print its predecessor than it is this one because of the keyword mechanic, but I would not be surprised if this is a card that does get reprinted in future sets. Now we have an interesting one after this, which is the Stormkiln Artist. So this is something that doesn't work like it used to, but I made out like a bandit on a card called Pitiless Plunderer. So Pitiless Plunderer is a card that creates a treasure every time something dies. So it is something that, wow, now I'm actually looking at the non-foils. So the non-foils have just skyrocketed in price up to $6.34. So maybe even but where I got in was the foils. So foil Pitiless Plunderers is where I bought in at, I believe it was like 10 cents back here. So I was able to find them for like a quarter or 10 cents a piece from, I think it was even a vendor like Channel Fireball that just had tons of them in stock. And right here when they weren't really worth anything. So it says 80 cents on an empty goldfish, but this is never the price that you're going to be paying for a card. You're going to be paying less than this from even premier vendors. They're not going to compete with TC Mid. They're going to try to go underneath it. And I got into on many, many copies at this because I was able to identify how well, first of all, being a player in Magic the Gathering gives you a huge advantage over someone that's not a player in Magic the Gathering. So I highly, highly encourage you to get involved and actually play. Because how I was able to identify this particular one is I wanted a deck, one of my commander decks, one of my pet decks, my first deck I ever built was Teysa Orzhov Scion. And one day I was looking to upgrade it around the 6-on time period. I'm like, wow, this card would go great in that deck because then it works with some of the sacrifice combos. It creates that mana, and then you can just recast things from the graveyard, and you go infinite with many of the sack type outlets with Pitiless Plunder. And so that's when I spec'd into on that, and I don't know if I would have actually identified this card if I wasn't playing. And it was dirt cheap at the time. You can actually see it was dirt cheap for a long time, and now it's just really increased in value up to the point that, that is a very, very good. I mean, people talk about their sealed, how much they made out on sealed products, being able to, double up or one up. But going from 10 cents to $20, that's the kind of returns you want to find. Of course, there's fees involved, but at that time, that is just a no-brainer. You win on this particular setting. And I think I've been slowly selling these for the past couple of years. Once they did hit this kind of price, we put them all up, and they've been selling quite well. And so this is the type of target that you want to look for. Well, we do have this opportunity in this set with the Stormkiln Artist. This is very similar to Pitiless Plunder. In fact, they're the same converted mana cost at 4. Similar, well, I guess the body on the Pitiless Plunder is a little bit better for Commander, but it also gets +1/+0 for each artifact control, so it's got this little ability above it. And the Mage cards, when you've cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, create a treasure token. That card just goes nuts with tons of cards. It's almost like the dragon that was printed out of the last set, the Goldspan Dragon, but for any copy, and things don't have to target it. There are many commanders that work off of this sort of cast and think about Feather the Redeemed, which is a very, very popular commander. It's going to hit that sweet spot with that commander. That's another thing I like to do is identify where is this commander going to fit. Is there any popular commanders? You can do that with EDHREC. You can actually click on a card here. So let's get the Emeritus here, and you can see that the cards it is using. I used to have a thing called Top Commanders. Let's see if we can still Top Cards. Oh, did they get rid of that? Did they get rid of the top commanders that it's used in? Womp womp. EDHREC used to show you the top commanders that it was played in. Unfortunately, it looks like they might have wiped that, which is sad, as that was a great tool. So maybe they can bring that back. Hopefully they can. But you can still see the high synergy ones, and you can see that you can find a commander that they do have high synergy with. Yeah, that's unfortunate that that's the case. But things like Tauren, of course, has got a high synergy. Rashmi, you can start to identify the commanders here. Nimbus at Perrin. Then you go and check on these particular commanders and see how popular they are in the scope of things. And right there will cause their own demand of people upgrading these already existing decks. Any card whenever slots in like Marin or Atraxa, or I'm trying to think of some of the other top commanders that are a particular color combination or want a particular like type of card. Anytime a new print comes out or a new card comes out that works for those decks, they're automatic buys, because the amount of Marin decks and the amount of Atraxa decks that are just out there are probably more demand over the long term than a format even like Pioneer, for example. So those are another things you want to keep in your wheelhouse here of knowledge, of knowing which commanders are extremely popular, which ones actually do last the test of time. And then you start finding those upgrades that come out of new sets, and those are automatic buys as well, even if they don't really go in many other decks. So speaking of Feather is still a very popular commander, I believe. So if we go over to the commanders, 2-color Boros, I believe Feather is still incredibly popular. So let's see, Boros commanders. So just have an all-time. So let's say Feather's actually fallen out of favor now. I start talking about this. I do not see Feather in the top 10 anymore. So we have Depala, we have Winota. Depala probably gets a lot more interesting because all the dwarfs that were created. It doesn't look like Feather's here, unless I looked over it. Where Feather the Redeemed. Let's see if we can find Feather. There's Feather Redeemed. As well, I looked right over it because I'm looking for an old art here, old frame art, and I miss it's the #1 Boros commander. Where's Feather? Yeah, it's got this new art here. So there you go. So there's a great example. Feather the Redeemed, insanely popular commander. This one's going to slot in that commander deck with not the Archmage Emeritus, but the new one with the Stormkiln Artist. So this is a great one to start finding those foils. Yes, Collector's Edition will start to hit, but even foils have started to recover. We noticed that with like Throne of Eldraine. Throne of Eldraine is our first experience with the Collector's Edition. Yes, it's going to take a lot longer than normally with cards to be able to recover, but they do recover, and that's a good sign because we are worried that Collector's Edition would just change the landscape of like foils for eternity, that they'll never have the ability to go up in value from then on out. But if you actually look here with a lot of the cards from even Collector's Edition uncommons, why I'm talking about like commons, uncommons, they get incredibly common because of Collector's Edition having a lot more foils of commons and uncommons than anything else. But if we go over to the Throne of Eldraine and then switch over to the foils, main set foils, you can see that some of these uncommons and commons are starting to gain value. So we already have Drawn to Lock back at 750. It's more of a competitive card. Mystical Dispute, same thing. But here's a good example. Sir Conrad of the Grim, uncommon in so many collector's editions. It didn't really have a chance to go up to actually this is a pretty good multiplier at that point, even at $2. Didn't actually go down that much, but has been able to increase twofold with the amount of supply of collector's editions that are out there. And a $5 foil for an uncommon, that's still pretty reasonable with a set that is still in rotation. So that's good news going forward with collector's edition packs, that they won't, completely destroy foils for eternity. And you can find that with a lot of other, and Sire Conrad is a very popular commander card too. Here's another common with 7 dwarfs, which this one's funny to me because 7's not that, I guess there's that many 7 dwarfs commander decks out there that it's increased the price of this all the way to $5. So there's not a lot of dwarfs there. This is one that I don't like maybe I do like long term because of the meme of people playing it, but I think with more dwarfs printed, people are gonna have less desire for putting 7 dwarfs in their commander decks. But anyway, you can see some of these other uncommons are starting to do well in the scope of things for long term. Look, kind of crazy though. It's mostly playable, more competitive cards like Into the Story and whatnot that have been going up in value recently. But yeah, these even commons I do believe will start to recover long term. Alrighty, so back to at hand here. We probably won't have time to go through too much of this stuff, but again, these are the type of things that I like to identify. The Stormkiln Artist, you compare it against other foils from other recent sets that have collector's edition. What does this fit into? You start asking yourself the question about these long term, and I do like this card at the 49 cents. So this is, again, you don't want to be paying full retail for this. You want to be finding these for a quarter is where I'd be. So if you use things like Cardsphere, or if you have bulk bins, or if you have a lot of people that actually trade uncommons or have foil binders, stuff like that, you want to lowball here as the demand for this hasn't now stressed the supply. There'll be more supply coming in from collector's edition, and then slowly start to accumulate these Stormkiln Artists. I, however, would not fault you for going all the way up to $1 for a card like this, because I think it is going to age very, very well. And this is going to be a short set in the scope of things as far as memory is concerned, because we're going to have Modern Horizons that is going to be dropped on us in a month. It is just right around the corner for Modern Horizons 2, and then right after that we have Forgotten Realms. So this set is going to be the Forgotten set. These spring sets are usually the ones that are just too short before all the products start piling on and people move on to other things. So these multicolor cards are kind of hard to evaluate. Things like Bellatrix Witherbloom I think is over evaluated at a time. It does have this pay 10 life. We do have this Card Kingdom spread that is quite neat here with $10 spread here. Again, we'd have to check on these prices to see if there's a foil one or whatnot, if there's anything else. But this one is neat for the Bellatrix Witherbloom. The Mortality Spear also is looking very good for Commander. It is only in 48 decks, which is at 17% of 279 decks. Again, these are all decks that have been added to EDHREC since this card has been legal to do so. But I think the Mortality Spear does destroying target non-land permanent is a pretty good 4-mana spell, regardless of there's better ones out there there's ones that just cost 1 less mana or whatnot, but Mortality Spear's 4 mana to dissolve anything in the format besides the land is pretty good. And these are other ones too that I would not fault you. There also is the competitive aspect of this. I think post rotation there already is like a pest deck that does most of the cards do survive rotation. I think this could be a pretty good card in. It's very easy to enable with gaining life. And this is another one that I'd be looking at for foils And definitely, if you're opening packs or going through bulk, this is one I'd set aside because it's going to be higher than this particular price. Same thing with this Witherbloom Apprentice. It's a neat little effect with whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, lose a life and gain a life and draining effects. And I think the commander decks that do have this spells type matters decks in this black-green are going to want a card like this for long term. We have cards like Rip Apart that it gets a little less interesting because it's destroying an artifact enchantment for 2 mana and dealing 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker or sorcery speed. It's quite lackluster in the scope of things. You compare that to a Fracture. Here's a good example. Fracture's already up to $1.60. Mortality Spear's down to 36 cents. Again, we'd have to evaluate, are these cards in some sort of commander pre-constructed deck or whatnot? Is this what's actually leading to Mortality Spear being less than Fracture? If not, if there is this big discrepancy, this one's a little bit overhyped, this one's a little bit underhyped. I think that they do, very similar things. This one's a little bit more efficient as far as being able to kill anything, whereas this one is just artifact, enchantment, or planeswalkers. There's many of these type of effects. It's basically disenchant that you also can get planeswalker, and it might be a little bit over-evaluated at the moment with commander players, as is that adding the planeswalker for a black rather than a colorless really that important. And maybe it is, maybe it's not, but this is a good evaluation with where other things are starting to be priced at, comparatively speaking to its counterparts. So then we have even look at this little neat one with the solve the equation already up to $2.06. So again, look at these two. Look at this big discrepancy between an 85, something that's 85 decks versus yes, it's a tutor, yes, it's easier to put in any deck, versus this card that's in 131 decks. And which is the better buy, which is the better spec? Stormkiln Artist is probably going to go up. This one's probably going to go down. Then you just rinse and repeat with all these particular cards. I do typically like to focus more on the monocolor cards because they can be used in a lot more decks, and that's where we'll look at a few other of these things, like Resculpt is a common. This is a foil you probably want to keep. I think even Raven Form is starting to go up, if I remember correctly. Like Raven Form foils, like they did flatten out, and then Raven Form have been even already starting to. I saw a little bit of a dip up here for the foil, but these are definitely cards that I would not bulk out as in the, even though they are commons, in the 2 years down the road could easily be $1, $2 cards. And again, a lot of people think that it's just a waste of time to be looking at cards that don't have that above $2 value, but you have to find the right venue for these cards to be sold, and you will find buyers for them. I actually like this. That's sorcery speed for this sucker. Man, this new one they just printed out of Strixhaven is pretty decent at instant speed for a 4/4. Alrighty, so yep. Anyway, that is exactly how I evaluate stuff. Just keep going down things and looking at the cards. And again, I'll have an entire review just looking for the more TLDR version. Tomorrow I'll really scope through these, look at some of the rares, look at what commander cards are being played in, and I will give a top 10 list of Strixhaven cards that I think are good buys in the long term for commander. All right, so on to part B, before we get too long-winded here, is actually looking at particular cards. So obviously, there's an obvious commander to be looking at for spiking the prices of cards. So week one, I typically like to look at the top ones, and then a few weeks later start to pick up these particular cards. You have more time for these ones that aren't seeing as much play as like the main one. So Exodus Overlord is going to be the popular commander that everyone is going to start building. And they're going to come to EDH Rec, and they're going to net deck. They're going to basically do copy pastas, going over to Goldfish, going over to EDH Rec. I wonder if there's another site, if someone in the comment section below can talk about where other commander players tend to congregate. They're going to be congregating there and then looking at this and then looking for ideas to build their card. A lot of people are going to open this at their pre-release, or did open this at their pre-release, open it in a collector's edition and be like, wow, I really want to build this dude. And so you basically just click on this card, and EDH will start to show you all the new cards that go in these. That's another good way to get in here on commanders, by the way. So speaking about, top commanders, you can go over here to Golgari. Let's look at, probably is Marin still one of the most. Yep, Marin is still the most played. Golgari. And you'll come over here and it'll say new cards that have been printed recently with Marin. So in 46 new Marin decks, 28% have been running Culling Ritual. 24% have been running Beladros. Turgid has been played in 32%. You see, you look at Turgid's price already for commander playability, still hitting this nice little sweet spot. The days of $5 rares with collector's edition, this is insanity. Collector's editions and all the stuff that has been printed out with set boosters have still not been able to take a heavily played commander card below the $5 range, which is just absolute nuts. But anyway, there's the things for new cards and reprints you can start looking at for cards that could be good pickups for the long term for Marin. So anyway, it doesn't look like, it only says 5 here. You can't go any further. I wish you could go a little bit further for this little new card. Can you just click on it? And nope, doesn't go any further. That's a shame. I wish EDH Direct would allow you to expand this a little bit more. Anyway, we come back over to the Exodus, and then you can start to go to the high synergy cards. So there you go. That probably explains Pitiless Plunder going up even more, because there is a lot of synergy between Exodus, Oracle Overlord, and Pitiless Plunder. Whenever a creature dies, this does want to deal with cards either entering the battlefield or dying effects to get more value out of their cards, because Exodus is going to be able to return a creature back to your owner's hand. This is also a mana-hungry deck, so it's going to want things that generate mana. So their Pitiless Plunder is perfect for that deck. You see that this Fury Storm is the next highest one played in 46% of it. So whenever you cast a spell, copy it for each time you cast your commander, and copy target instant sorcery spell. This is just a boss of a card that is poised to go up in value. So Fury Storm, not that old in the scope of things, but it does have insane synergy with this particular card. I would not be surprised if it already did go up. Wow, this is actually surprising that it hasn't gone up for a while, as it does have massive synergy with the #1 commander out right now. So you copy it for each time that you've cast your commander. You can copy an target instant sorcery spell. You're going to get triggers off of all of these things happening with your commander. So you're going to be able to get many cards back from your graveyard to your hand with this Fury Storm. And what I like about Fury Storm, it's not the most popular of cards with other commander decks. So it's only in 1% of all decks. As far as some of the other cards that were printed in this cycle, it's one of the ones that isn't as interesting as the other ones that were printed in other color combinations. But it does synergize perfectly with the new commander. These are the cards that I love to identify. These brand, kind of breathing new life into an old card. And it's where typically these cards like Fury Storm, or cards that are harder to slot in other commanders, they have a lower price than they would if they already were in many other decks. And as a result of that, less people have them in their binders, less people have them. They're not just lying around. They're not they're like a Helm of a Host that everyone knows where it's at and knows the value of it. You're going to find these in, maybe someone still has this in a rare binder somewhere, or in a bulk binder somewhere, where that they've forgotten that this card even existed. And there's less supply in the scope of things on like TCG Player or at stores because of the lack of popularity for a particular card. So if you can identify a card, a commander, that is want to breathe new life into a new card, that has not as popularity as something else, this is just the perfect storm for a card going up in value or spiking in value. So I do like Fury Storm a lot for Exodus. Zulaport Cutthroat is one of these cards that gets printed a ton. Mayhem Devil gets a little bit interesting, but I believe it was in a few precons and whatnot. And Dualcaster Mage does get more interesting, but you got to think how many times this stupid card has been cast. But is this the commander that actually can bring up the value of Dualcaster Mage? Probably not, because Dualcaster Mage is common at this point for how many times the damn thing's been printed. Just to give you a... Dualcaster Mage needs some help, because it has been printed so many times in the past. We had Jumpstart, we have Eternal Masters, we have Archenemy, we have Commander Legends, we have Commander 2020, we have Commander 2020, we have Commander 2014, we have Double Masters. Woo! A lot of these are like in the last year. Jumpstart, Double Masters, Commander 2021, Commander 2020. All, I guess Commander 2021 is this one. So yeah, it's not going to be able to go up in value right there. The Commander Legends Precon. Wasn't it in just Commander Legends itself too? I was thinking it was just in... I guess it's just in the Precon. But man, oh man, has this card been printed like crazy. So again, this would be a card that would have the look good for an increase, but then you really start to dig into it and then realize, yeah, this card is not going to be able to go up in value because of how many times it has been reprinted in the not so distant past. So again, you keep doing this, you keep going down the line, and you can start looking at so another thing you can do then, the next thing is to look at these next brackets here. What does this card want? It wants creatures, it wants sorceries, and it wants instances, or it also wants artifacts or enchantments that copy spells. And so then you can come down to the next bracket, which is going to be the top cards, and then you want to identify the ones that. What's cool about each deck is it does show high synergy cards. Like does this have more synergy than? It's kind of funny. It's finding Swords to Plowshare because this is just like a card that goes in every white deck, but it's for whatever reason identifying high synergy of a plus 4%. We have the of course, Mana Rocks. This is one thing about this commander deck is you're going to be wanting to run every Mana Rock known to man because play the sucker. I do play this one. I'll be looking for another video that I'm going to come out explaining what we do called Commander League, which is open up an entire box of Strixhaven and building a deck out of it for Commander. And this is the one I actually do play in my Commander League. And I played it a couple times already, and it is just so mana hungry. So I do think that they're going to want every talisman known to man in this deck. And, these ones are poised to go up in value. I have things, of course, like Smothering Tithe in here. Knowing Processions, I guess it could go in if you're really copying. It depends on how you build the deck. Maybe as time goes on, this is going to be less and less of a shoe-in for this particular commander because it does work off the backside of casting that commander. But nothing too interesting right here that they've identified with high synergy yet with like copying instant sorcery spells. So we go over to the creatures. We have again, Pond of Ulamog with these sacrifice combos. Grim Harrispec for getting value out of then when creatures die. Monastery Mentor with cast triggers giving you more fodder, probably to kind of rinse and repeat these type of strategies. And Londa, same thing with Londa. Londa has a lot of synergy with this particular deck because it's going to be killing creatures, putting counters, and then killing Londa. Londa goes back to the graveyard. You can be able to get Londa back into your hand to cast again, rinse and repeat, and so on and so forth. We have Ogre Slumlord at a low price here, which is the first one that really looks interesting, but this one has had some recent reprints. So you just keep going down the list of cards before you can start identifying the cards that are going to work the best in the deck. So again, in instances will get very interesting if you can find those type of copy cards. So far, it's nothing out of the unusual when we're looking at the first one. It's just very, go-to cards that you see all the time in Commander. And this will start to get more solidified. There are only 65 decks to draw from. And yes, they are trendsetters with the first ones that are put out. But eventually, you're going to start to find a consensus of cards that people do want to run in here. So here's one that's interesting right off the bat is this Worthy Cause. Worthy Cause is cool because buyback. Buyback is something that you can just pay and you get it back to your hand. And so this is the type of effect that you're going to want in a Magecraft deck to be able to cast over and over again. And it has the ability to sacrifice a creature and gain life. So this is perfect. It's a sack outlet and a trigger. So this is a card you absolutely want to identify in the deck as a shoe-in. So I am very, very hyped about Worthy Cause. And it would not be surprising if Worthy Cause is having a worthy spike right now. And if it is not, yeah, this is a slight one, but I think you have time to get in on this guy. And the whole reason why is this is exactly what I'm talking about, a card you want to identify. Old card that no other commander really wanted. Yes, some other commanders back in the day would use half of this ability. Maybe they'd use the spell ability of it. Maybe they wanted the sacrifice ability. So this was like a renewable resource for a sacrifice ability. Maybe a commander in the past that gained life and wanted to sacrifice creatures wanted this one. But maybe there was other better options on a stick. But this might be the first commander in the history of commanders that really, really wants both sides of this ability. Casting it as an instant to return a creature back from your graveyard, sacrificing something that's got an ETB ability or a sacrifice effect to get it back in the graveyard, rinse and repeat for 3 mana. That is a great, kind of on a stick by itself, ability to rinse and repeat and have an engine for your deck. So I am all in on this Worthy Cause. Before this video is out, I'm probably going to go buy up a bunch. Yeah, it might be a different price by the time we get to it. But again, this is the type of card you absolutely want to find. Coin of the Week is up to $7.57. Jeez, I need to actually go look through my book to see how many of these particular cards I have. But again, every set, that's what I really like to do. And you can kind of spread it out, buy a bunch of cards and, a bunch of 1-0s of particular cards. Or you can go all in on a card that you feel like is going to have a decent double up or triple up or whatnot. So anyway, those are my 2 things when a new set comes out that I tend to look for. And again, we'll be looking at these cards tomorrow in a top 10 list. I'll give you my analysis for these particular cards. And hopefully I can find some other goodies here other than just the worthy cause. This one's actually very interesting too, Burnt Offering. So the big difference between like Burnt Offering and there's a card called Sacrifice is Burnt Offering can only be played in a Rakdos deck because of the Sacrifice creature at a creature's casting cost of a combination of red or black mana. So red or black mana is actually the mana symbols is what it's been errated to, and technically this can only be used in a Rakdos deck, and so I'm actually liking this Burnt Offering too, as it fulfills the slot of what this deck wants as well. It gives you a sacrifice ability to put a creature in the graveyard that's got some sort of ETB effect or die effect, gives you mana, it's a very mana hungry commander, and it does trigger that Magecraft, so there's another good one. So anyway, before I get too excited with this worthy cause that we found, identified this particular card, I'm going to let everyone go. And happy speculating. Hope you enjoyed this video, and be looking for part 2 over at the Rogue Market tomorrow. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.